Love can be exhilarating and wonderful, but it can also be painful and complicated. Join clinical psychologist and best-selling author Dr. David Hawkins as he reveals the truth about the good, the bad, and the ugly aspects of relationships. Listen in as he gives you practical tips for hope and healing. Welcome to the podcast, Mad in Love.
Welcome to Mad in Love. If you're new here, I'm Dr. David Hawkins of the Marriage Recovery Center, and today we're kicking off something I don't even really know what's coming at me, but it's a brand new segment that our producer, Katie Buckley, has come up with, and it's called Dr. Hawkins Reacts, and I kind of think I'm going to react, but I have with me today my esteemed colleague, Jonathan Glover, and he's going to be, I don't know what he's going to be doing, to tell you the truth. He's going to be throwing stuff at me, and I'm going to try to not look too dumb and try to make really wonderful responses, but some of them might be sort of wonderful and sort of insightful. And anyway, Jonathan, welcome, and I hope you'll be kind. I think I'm in a batter's box, and you're throwing me curves and sliders, and so I've just got my bat ready, and I hope you'll just lob little softballs. Maybe you could start with softballs, huh? Big,
sure,
big. All right. Anyway, welcome, Jonathan, and let's go with Dr. Hawkins Reacts. What is this all about, anyway? Give me a little bit of insight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this series. Actually, something that you might not even know about me. I sometimes spend a little bit of time lurking on Quora and Reddit, Reddit especially,
Okay.
Back a few years ago, I actually would spend some of my lunch breaks responding to some of the mental health posts as just a ghost writer, professional.
Then why are we not switching positions here? Why am I not throwing you the curveballs?
So what I was going to say here is that it's fun to sort of read some of the questions that people have about mental health. There's so I get lost in it, just following all sorts of different posts and then reading all of the comments. And it's kind of nice also to see the different communities that form in online with answering these questions and things. So when Katie came to me with this idea, though, of reading some of these posts and some of these questions, I was excited about it, partly also because I do want to hear your thoughts on some of these articles and some of these questions. So every month
I'm excited, but I'm a little nervous.
So the plan is every month that we're going to compile some of these stories or questions from Reddit or Quora that we might find interesting. And then I will present those here for you and get your authentic initial reactions.
Do we get to interact? Can I throw the question back at you, or is that is that a foul ball?
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. I'll dialogue with you for sure, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts, especially having not interacted with these posts or these questions prior to recording this. I think it'll be really interesting to hear your initial thoughts.
Softball first.
Absolutely. So then we're going to break down the story a little bit with our listeners, and we'll give our opinions as professional therapists.
Cool. All right, here we go.
Yeah, let's jump into it. Let's see. This is a Reddit story that was submitted by throwaway_28900. This is about 2 months ago. I did remove some of the content. It's a long post, so just
Okay.
in the interest of time and our listeners' attention, I removed some of it. So I apologize, OP. Let's see. Okay, so I'll just read to you, and I'll try to read slowly enough that you can process while I'm reading.
Thank you.
The other day, I saw a Twitter post that said, if a man ever calls his girlfriend crazy, he was the one to drive her to that point. I'm a guy, and that's exactly what my ex did to me. She constantly said rude things to me. She belittled me and my feelings, and when I asked her to stop doing something, she would tell me she's not going to censor herself for my sake. She made fun of my appearance, particularly things I told her I was insecure about. She would threaten to break up with me over trivial things just so I would do what she wanted. If I ever put up a boundary, she'd go out of her way to tear it down. She constantly talked about her sex life with people before me, how good it was, in excruciating detail. I asked her to please stop because it made me uncomfortable. She treated it like she treated all the other boundaries I tried to set. A lot of times, whenever she needed to make a choice about something, she would ask me for advice on what to choose, and whenever I picked something, she would do the opposite and make sure she told me in vivid detail how glad she was that she didn't listen to me. This happened multiple times. There were times where she would act super erratically. She'd shower me with love and affection one day to give me a false sense of security, and then a few days later she'd lash out and yell at me for just asking her a question. Sometimes she'd even make a decision that would threaten her physical safety, and if I told her not to, she'd act like I was being controlling. It was like walking on eggshells. It was like every interaction between me and her was a game of chess where she had all of her pieces and all I had was a king. Anytime I tried to have a calm, rational discussion about how something made me feel, she'd just keep trying to goad me into a fight by saying things to upset me. At the moment I got even the least bit upset, she'd turn it all around and act like I was pushing her too far again. When she finally broke up with me, I felt like a broken doll. I remember being in tears and unsure what to do because at this point she'd spun everything around to our mutual friends to make me look like I was crazy. And frankly, I was, because I'd spent the last year and a half feeling like my mind was locked in a cage and I didn't know how to feel normal again. One of the last things she ever said to me was, "We all think you need help." I've been thinking about why I stayed so long. Part of it was that I was so desperate to believe that somebody really loved and cared for me that I let her treat me however she wanted, which is on me. But the other part was that she was so good at masking her abuse with kindness. She smiled when telling me that her ex was so much better than me and that I needed to outlast him. She giggled after telling me that she didn't really care about me. It was so easy to rationalize what she was saying as a joke when it really wasn't. She knew exactly how to push my buttons, how to withhold affection whenever she wanted me to feel hurt, how to do just the bare minimum to make it seem like she cared. I was just being used for a year and a half, and I didn't want to accept it. And then he goes on to say that he says his point is that emotional abuse can affect anyone and be scary for anyone to experience, regardless of gender or ethnicity or sexuality or anything. And he says he posted about this online before when he was in a worse state of mind, and he was responded to with insults. He was gaslit and treated like he was the problem, no matter how she treated him. Then he thanks the readers, and then he also, after receiving a lot of comments, he added an edit thanking people for their feedback.
All right. Well, I want to just congratulate you. You know, the title of this whole podcast is Dr. Hawkins Reacts. You've done it. You've done it. I have about 27 reactions, and I'm trying to keep them all clear in my mind.
Excellent. I saw you taking notes.
I'm flooded. I'm really flooded. So, All right.
Jump in anywhere.
Oh, okay, I've got about 3 places I want to jump in. First of all, I want to this guy. Do we know this guy's name? I want to compliment him. I mean, he's really mindful. He's what's his name?
Throwaway. Throwaway. Well, underscore 28900.
Dear Throwaway, you're thinking about this stuff. So my first reaction is good for you to be. You're thinking. You're watching. You're reasonably self-aware. And Jonathan, that's what we want in the work that we're doing. We want people to show up and be reasonably self-aware. So he sounds like he's reasonably self-aware. That's one reaction. A second reaction is, I don't like it. I don't like it, Jonathan, when anybody, man or woman, says something like this. I know why she did it. She was just trying to goad me into a reaction, and she was thinking the whole time, and she reeled me in, and then she whacked me a good one. And I know they're really, and you and I often, Jonathan, hear women say this, and men can say it too, like, I know why they're doing what they're doing. I do. I got it figured out. They are doing this to get me to do that, and then they get me to do this, and then when I do that, they do this, and they do that. And
right.
Like, I don't know about you in session, but when anybody does that with me, like, I know why they're doing what they're doing because my eyes start spinning in the back of my head. I don't know what I'm doing 98% of the time. I'm reacting. So that's my second reaction. And we can dive back into any of these. My third reaction is, wow, this is a story of trauma bonding. Trauma bonding, by definition, is an admixture of pluses and minuses that makes the bond even more intense and powerful. Or in this case, she, Throwaway, says she's so loving and kind. And she's so provocative and angry and hostile. And then she's so sensitive and caring. And then she's so vicious and mean. And all of that's the definition of trauma bonding. Trauma bond is the admixture of pros and cons, pluses and minuses that make it really difficult. I'm surprised that this man did walk away. He apparently did. But
right.
So trauma bonding creates this powerful, powerful bond. And when any of us on the outside say to our friends or whoever, come on, there's plenty of fish in the sea. You just don't put up with this garbage. Come on. I think that's just the most inane thing any of us as clinicians or friends can do. Come on, it's complex. It's a complex mixture of pros and cons that creates an intense bond. So there you go. Number one, actually, can I do a fourth reaction?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's okay. I like this. There's no rules. Okay.
No. Hit me with it.
My fourth reaction is like, yeah, provocation. I wrote down on my notes here, provocation on both of their parts. So, they're feeling provoked, and they're provoking, or they're provocative. And you and I both know from our work with nonviolent communication, couples really communicate poorly with each other, and they're provocative with each other. And then they're surprised when their mate reacts. Like, come on. So this Throwaway man, he was provoked and he was provocative, and it created a lot of trouble in the relationships. All right, so there's my 4 points. One, I don't like the goad me into a fight. Don't like that. Trauma bonding, provocation, and kudos. This is not in this order. And kudos to the man for being mindful and at least thinking about what is his part in all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned.
Am I done now? Is that? Are we through?
No, we just got started.
Oh man,
I don't remember which points they were. I think it was points 2 and 4. Just made me think of that concept of thinking errors or thought traps.
Yeah.
If I'm working with a couple and noticing those things in their speech coming up, if we haven't already talked about thinking errors, I call a big timeout and say, "Oh, do you know what that's called that you're doing right there?"
Ah.
And so that first one that you mentioned of the mind reading.
Yeah, right. I know what you're doing. I know why you're doing it, and it creates. By the way, it creates in me. If I start thinking I know what you're doing, and I think you're doing something mean, I mean, of course, I'm going
Right.
to feel resentment towards you. You're out to get me, and so
Right.
I need to be careful. You're going to trap me or entrap me, and how I'm going off on another tangent, but I'm just one big reactivity here. But
Well,
anyway, yeah.
I mean, that is, it goes, it fits in nicely with that first point that you made. And I'm glad that you responded to the poster with that thought first, to say, like, good job for pausing and reflecting. And it
Yeah.
sounds like this is maybe his second or third time posting about this topic online. And, the having that awareness and thinking about it is good, because when you're in that space of those thought traps, the thinking errors, you're not reflecting on what's going on internally for you and how you are assessing the situation. It's all about the other person, that they are doing that.
Let's emphasize that, Jonathan, that I often, when I'm working with the men that I'm working with, I talk about creating a SEAM, SEAM. Just pause for a moment. Just pause. I've got an acronym: breathe, observe, wait. BOW. Bow. Just breathe. Just breathe before you react. Just breathe for a moment. Observe what's going on and wait for a moment before you say anything, because otherwise you're just one reactivity after another reactivity. And in this case, throwaway was, he's reacting, she's reacting, he's reacting, she's reacting. And it's a mess. And it takes some real mindfulness, which you teach, mindfulness, to step outside of our reaction and go, yeah, wait a second now. What is my part in all of this? And what are some things I can do differently? But that really, it just takes a lot of skill.
Yeah, the other thinking error that popped up in my head when you were mentioning your fourth point is emotional reasoning. And it's really, I mean, because that's what you were describing, is it's really just allowing what you are experiencing emotionally to drive drive the vehicle, but also to, it becomes your reality. If I feel attacked, you must be attacking me. And never mind the fact that the other person might actually be trying to express needs or something along those lines. And so I think, you mentioned the bow skill, which I might have to steal.
Well,
But
I just made it up last week.
I love it.
I make up, I mean, that's how we learn, right? We just, I thought, that's a cool thing to teach people. Anyway,
it reminds me of, there's a couple dialectical behavior therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy skills. One of the classic ones is the stop skill. And then there's also the rest skill in Brantley and Wood and McKay's books.
Yeah.
But the additional step that's in there is, like you just described, pause yourself, relax, take a step back, evaluate. And then there's another step in there that's important to do, I think, sometimes, especially when you're trying to not be motivated by the emotion. And because usually that's like immediate gratification type stuff. Set an intention. What are your goals? What do you want to get out of this conversation? But also, what do you want from your relationship as a whole? And how do you move in that direction? So
our colleague Charmin came up with something. You can steal this too, because I stole it from her, but now it's mine. She says she likes to ask couples, "What are you fighting for?" And it's a double entendre, of course. Like what are you fighting for? Or what exactly are you fighting for? What is it that you hope, what you just said? What do you hope to get out of this interaction? And I think most of us, if we were honest, we're fighting because we want to win. We want to,
Right.
we want to make our point. And we
Yes.
do. And we do.
I don't even know when I'm fighting, I don't even know if I'm that clear.
Good point. Yeah.
It's just emotion. And then I go.
It is just emotion, and then we go. I'd like to key up for a moment on the topic of thinking errors, because I think that, can you just share a little, and I'm turning it back on you. Can you share what a thinking error is, or would you call it a thought
Trap?
Thought trap, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it, both terms used interchangeably. How do you?
What is it? What is it? What is a thinking error?
I guess maybe you have a better way of describing this. I'd basically say it's an opinion. It's not a fact. It's an opinion that you are holding that is an extreme way of thinking, and often we think that is the reality. So we think it's a fact when really it is a fairly extreme opinion, and it locks us into that way of thinking about things, and we forget, or we don't notice, that there are other things that might be true.
Yeah, like all or nothing thinking, like black and white thinking, like I'm really getting a raw deal here. That's one of my favorites. I tend to just drift toward, like, I'm not being treated fairly here. This is I'm a victim in this situation, or anyway, grandiosity, entitlement. Yeah, they all are distortions. And I think if we are functioning with that distortion, like playing the victim, I'm getting a raw deal. When I pull back and I create a seam, when I bow, B-O-W, like, no, nah, not true.
You just said something really interesting. You used that term, playing the victim. How do you differentiate between playing the victim as almost, I mean, it makes it sound almost manipulative, what you're saying. How did you differentiate between that and being a victim of abuse, or those harmful relationship dynamics?
Yeah, so I think you said it, Jonathan. When a thought gets crystallized, and so there's a reductionistic point of view. So, when this man settles into, I'm not responsible. I'm not responsible. I was emotionally abused, and that's all there was to it. That's the sum total of everything going on here. I was abused. I was wronged. I have no part to play. Or what you and I often hear a man or a woman say is, I know I had a part to play. Of course I know that. I mean, of course I do. But I really was a victim, and that's the sum total of, I mean, that's it. That's where that's going to shape how I view everything. And so, to answer your question more precisely, of course, we want to look at folks and say, yeah, you were treated, you were harmed there in that situation. However, take responsibility for what is your part. How did you, what were you ever victimizing as well? Were you ever abusive as well? Was there ever any, were there times when she wasn't abusive, when she was actually healthy? So anyway, I think to get out of a thinking error, we want to expand the thinking and look at things more holistically.
Yeah, I guess going back to the post, I do get that question sometimes, especially when I'm meeting with the men, to ask, well, can't a woman be abusive herself? Like, it's do you think that it's always the man? What are your thoughts on a kind, I don't know, the gender statistics or the what you see in relationships as far as that goes?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I just continue to think about it because it's a complex issue. So abuse, my definition of abuse is it's a pattern of the abuse of power and control. It's a pattern of behavior. So in other words, so whenever I hear of a situation where a woman is reactively abusive, and it's not really a pattern of power and control, it's not a pattern of violence, then, and it's contextual, okay, it only happens in this one situation or something like that, then I'm not going to be prone to calling her emotionally abusive or him emotionally abusive. But if it's a pattern of behavior and I can look and go, yeah, this has been long standing, it's widespread, it's a way that you react in many different situations, then, but the gender, I mean, the statistics say 90% of emotional abuse perpetrated by men. I would say that's true, but I'm not rigidly attached to any number or percentage. I want to, with every situation that comes in front of me, I want to look at things. I want to evaluate that situation for that situation. I don't bring to it like, okay, now I know that whatever walks in the door, 90% are, I don't, it's not the way I think. So I'm open to saying to a man, she may have a pattern of abuse, of violence and power and control. And we can be open to looking at that and looking at how you're responding to it.
Yeah. You made an interesting point. I think it's an important one to differentiate between the abuse as a pattern, but then you also mentioned the reactive abuse and the reactive boundary crossing, whether it's physical or psychological boundary violations. And
we know. I did a video and where I said something like a woman is, I mean, as Mr. Throwaway, I don't like calling him that, by the way. I mean, whatever his name was, I'm going to call him him. I'm going to call him him. Anyway, him, when he is provoked again and again and again, and he reacts to that provocation, I think we've got to look at, is it a reaction to provocation? In my video, I talk about a woman being like a can of Coke that's shaken up and shaken up and shaken up and shaken up. And we can sense that with this man too, that there's provocation all over the place. And when there's provocation, any of us, that's why I think, Jonathan, we've got to encourage people to pull apart in some form or fashion, to create a seam, to maybe even a separation at times, to create a little more breathing room so that there's not this reaction. I think you and I and clinicians, we have to do our part to say, hey, look, my goodness, this is a tinderbox. It's explosive. Let's encourage you to pull apart and breathe and look at things from a different perspective and to see if we can interject some change into the whole situation.
Some of the responses to Throwaway's original post, some of the commenters, Coerced account 2, Coerced says nobody in the initial, I think he's responding to the fact that he had posted previous to this one, and he said nobody took that abuse seriously because it was emotional abuse, and because you are male. Women's emotions are literally the most important thing in our culture. This is what Coerced account 2 says. Men's feelings and well-being in general mean nothing. And helpful past 9128 responded to his comment that's only part of it, because unfortunately there are statistically more male abusers than females. So the awareness of female victims is higher because there are more of them. It's one of those expletive statistics that highlights how much more we need to do as a whole species to educate and get better than toxic masculinity. No one profits with that mindset being the norm. What's a greater issue here is the secrecy of emotional abuse. It crawls and seeps into life at home, oozing from the abuser, who is suddenly the perfect person the moment someone important is there to witness them. It's difficult to spot and nearly as difficult to escape and heal from.
Wow. Brilliant. I have another reaction now that I think about this man's post. And that is, he kept saying, you kept reading in his post, I attempted to set boundaries and she violated every boundary. I'm going to get a little nitpicky here, and this is I'm reacting, but I hear it all the time, Jonathan. I hear people, men and women, say this to me. I set a boundary and she just violates it all the time. And then I'm a little provocative and go, well, what's the boundary again? Well, I've told her 27 times that I hate it when she uses expletives. And then I go, yeah, that's not a boundary. Well, what do you mean it's not a boundary? I told him I hate being sworn at. Yeah, that's not a boundary. I mean, it's a complaint. I mean, it's a very passionate complaint, and I'm with you that I don't want to be sworn at either. But a boundary is clearly articulated, and then it's enforced. It's enforced, and we are the enforcers of it. So if I'm really going to set a boundary, so this man, throwaway, said, I kept setting a boundary and she kept violating it. I'm going to get nitpicky with them. And I'm going to go, I don't know that you did set a boundary. You complained, to be sure. But did you really say, the next time, if you were to swear at me, I don't like being sworn at. And if you swear at me, I'm going to walk out of the room. And more important, when I come back into the room, I'm going to invite you, you don't have to, but I'm going to invite you to take ownership for swearing at me. And if you do that, then I'm going to be re-engaged with you, because I got to tell you, if anybody else, this is another shamanism, if anybody else talked to me the way that you've talked to me, I wouldn't be in relationship with them. So I got to let you know that I'm just letting you know, here's the deal. If you decide to swear at me, which you can do, but if you do, here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to like it. That's a little provocative, but boundaries are to be enforced, or they're not boundaries.
Well, boundaries, that term, I will get up on my soapbox all day long about how I don't know if it's just... It's just the colloquial use of the term has just become all encompassing for somehow. But I absolutely agree with what you said, and I think that people mistake boundaries for your expectations or your needs or wants in a relationship. And I think it's important to be able to express what you want, either in the relationship as a whole or in this specific moment in time or this conversation. But a boundary is, at least in my mind, is how are you going to respond when there is lack of safety, or when you do not have the security that you want, or when your needs and wants or your expectations are not being met in that moment. What are you going to do about it? And it's not about controlling the other person. It's not about punishing them. It's not trying to prove a point. It's for you. It's to keep yourself safe and get to a place where you are feeling safe and secure and getting your needs met. So how are you going to get there?
So notice the way you said that, and notice what I said, Jonathan, when I said, I'm not going to sit with you swearing at me. I'm just not going to. Now, what I didn't say, Jonathan, and so many people make this mistake. So many people say, you can't talk to me that way. I mean, of course I can. Or you need to lower your voice. That one's never worked in the history of humankind. You need to lower your voice. Okay, honey, sure. Happy to do that. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So when we try to control the other person, they feel controlled. And so, no, I'm just calmly, clearly, perhaps passionately saying, here's what I'm going to do. I want to pivot just slightly, Jonathan. I want to talk just for a moment about men's feelings, because you read something like men's feelings have never been given validity. I'm going to, my goodness, we may get some bad press from what I'm about to say, but I find both genders struggle with really naming feelings. So in other words, it's very common for me to hear a man say, I just feel like she's angry all the time. And I go, yeah, right. What do you feel? Well, I just told you, I feel like she's angry all the time. Yeah, right. But what do you feel? And then they get impatient with me. Like, I just told you, I feel like she is always angry, like things always have to be her way, like da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And of course, you can get what I'm getting at, I hope, that men, I think particularly, but probably both genders, talk in opinions and really struggle with, Brene Brown has become famous for her work on vulnerability. I feel hurt when such and such happens. I feel sad. And then letting ourselves feel sad and feel hurt. So anyway, I don't find most men and women are not really conversant with the whole topic of feeling. So I take exception to this, whatever you read about men and men's feelings. I don't think we're good at it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where Helpful Past is responding to Coerced account. Coerced said that bit about women's emotions are literally the most important thing in our culture. Men's feelings are and well-being in general mean nothing. And then Helpful Past brings up this topic of toxic masculinity, where and I suppose that would be maybe even a whole another topic for a different day, but because that's a lot to unpack there. But I do think that there is an element of the cultural dynamics that play a factor into the development of the psyche and what patterns we engage in, what we are encouraged to do, and what we kind of are steered away from. And I do think that there are for sure some gender roles and expectations in there, and I think they're stronger depending on a lot of different factors, religion and culture. And I'm using the word culture not just meaning like racial culture or culture, but I'm talking about community culture, maybe even your family culture that you grow up in. So but I don't know, that's a big topic. Maybe we should dog ear that one for
dog ear it. Get our producer to dog ear that. So you're familiar, are you not, Jonathan, with the bumper sticker? We teach people how to treat us.
Yeah,
I really like that bumper sticker. I
saw it on the back of your car.
Yeah, it is. It's my bumper. It's on there. People don't like to hear that. But so back to the topic of boundaries, when someone, I mean, what I have found in my life, I'm the most blessed man on the planet, by the way. And I hope it's because I'm doing a few things right, but I have people around me who respect me. But I've given the message to everyone in my world. I'm happy to be in relationship. I'll say it to you, Jonathan. I'm happy to be in relationship with you. I like you. I genuinely like you. But here's the caveat. As long as you treat me nicely, I'm going to keep being in relationship with you. if you don't treat me nicely, there's nobody in my world, and that's true. And I'm going to probably get flack for this, but there's nobody in my world that treats me badly. Now, is that because I've selected people? Maybe. Is it because I've given the message? Look, I'm going to teach you how to treat me. Here's what, and I do that with my wife. I talk to her, and she talks to me. We've been married a long time now, and we say to each other, "Hey, here's." I liked it when you did that. I didn't like it when you did that. And if you do that, my wife has said to me, if you do that, I'm going to pull away from you. And I'm going like, I don't want that to happen. I do not want that to happen. So,
but, oh man, this topic is so much huger, because I want to say, yeah, but there's other factors to consider. You're a white man, so there's all sorts of. I mean, there's all sorts. The reason why you might feel confident in being able to speak up about your wants and needs and your boundaries it's because of all sorts of factors, and a lot of those do come from our culture and from our environment and expectations of the group as a larger whole. So I think this plays a little bit into why we do tend to see males as the abusers and women as having a hard time or a harder time speaking up and saying, I'm not okay with this. Because when they start to, this is interesting in Helpful Past's post where he says the secrecy of emotional abuse. And I think that that's a big part of it, is that when people start to say, I don't think something's off, something doesn't feel right in this relationship, and they start to speak up about it, they go to their parents about it, or they go to their pastor, or they go to their friends, and they try to explain what's going on. But since it's like smaller parts of a bigger picture, a bigger whole, I think it's hard. They often sort of feel insecure about it or unsure. And then the response that they get is sort of like, are you sure? Is that maybe you're making a bigger deal about this than it should be. And then they walk away from that. So that's why I think he says the secrecy of emotional abuse, but I don't know if it's a secret as much as it's just not understood as well as it should be.
If it's the norm, if it's the norm, then we all adjust to the norm. We adjust to it. We settle into it, and it becomes what's called the status quo. And disrupting the status quo, this is back to what I said half an hour ago, that any of us that would look at anyone and say, oh, come on, you need to either just get out or... No, it's never that simple, as you and I both know. So these are complex. Emotional abuse is really, really, really complex.
Right. There's some other responders, some other commenters responding to his post. One of I'll just spell this user's name, AFKAWAYRN. Anyway, he says, never stay in a relationship if somebody doesn't respect you. And I think that's I mean, to me, it's that sounds like sage advice, but when you're in the relationship and you're like, do you respect me? And the other person's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, obviously I respect you. So I don't think when you're in it, it's as easy as that. And it's that type of kind of dismissive response that I think is really harmful and leads to a lot of confusion for the individual that's experiencing it.
What I have found, Jonathan, is that in my work, and I presume it's in your work too, if we teach people how to be tuned into their own feelings, to be observers of what's happening in their world, my feelings... Maybe because I've honed my feelings, but I know when something doesn't feel right to me. I know when I'm being harmed in some way by someone, and then I reflect. I listen to my feelings. I reflect, and then I take action. But I think a lot of people have dulled their feelings. They haven't worked on identifying what they're feeling, what's happening in their world. And so, yeah, the norm becomes, there's conflict all the time, but it's just kind of how we roll. So I think we got to teach people to be really tuned in. And what does respect actually look like? What does it feel like? What does emotional abuse look like? What does it feel like? So that we heighten awareness, so it's not a secret or it's not hidden in the culture.
Right. That's an interesting question also. If you were to give advice to how to respond to somebody who was coming to you, just if you were a family member or some sort of supportive person, and they're coming to you and they're describing something, what would be a good way to respond to them, or to give them support in some sort of way?
Yeah, so I've already said that I like the model of nonviolent communication, and Dr. Rosenberg came up with 4 steps everybody can take and think about all the time. Make an and by the way, I'm a journaler. I've got journals all over the place. When I die, I don't know what my family's going to do with these journals. I'm a little freaked out about it, and then I think, I'm not going to be around, so I don't know. Anyway, I've got journals stacked up, and people aren't you afraid they're going to? I don't know. They're going to do what they want to do. In my journal, I make observation. Okay, here's what happened. Really, what happened? Here's how I feel about what happened. Here's my need, my underlying need. And then here's what I might want to ask for. Observation, feeling, need, request. And I think people can journal every day. They can take time to reflect every day. They can think about what's happening in their world. And if they do that every day, all the time, again and again and again and again and again, they're going to learn about, so-and-so didn't return my phone call. I've called 3 times and I've been a really good friend to them. And yeah, they didn't return my phone call. Observation. Feeling. I feel neglected. I feel alone. I feel small. I feel, anyway, I identify a need. I need connection. I need respect. I need to be cared about. Da-da-da-da-da-da. What might I ask for? I might confront that friend. And I might say, hey, look, it's important to me that if we're going to have a friendship, anyway, and we work on this stuff. And then this is another podcast for our producer, but the notion of taking responsibility. So I dare not sit back and go, I can't believe they didn't return my phone call. I mean, I just can't believe that. Come on, I can believe it. This person has not returned a lot of phone calls. What am I doing about? Anyway, okay, observation, feeling, need, request. So those are some ways that we can all develop greater emotional maturity. That's another podcast, by the way. Emotional maturity, how to develop that. And taking responsibility for our lives is one key aspect of doing that.
Absolutely. Well,
okay. I've been one reactive individual. I hope this is you've been very provocative. Is this what we're we're doing, right?
I give you an A. You did great. I was really curious to hear your thoughts. So
all right. Well, all of these, again, I'm a blessed guy, Jonathan. I'm doing the kind of work I've loved to do for 40 years. And I don't have all the answers by any means, but I'm thinking about the answers. I'm thinking about this stuff, and you've raised some great points. So anyway, I want to thank you for being here. Dr. Hawkins Reacts. I wouldn't have had so many reactions if I didn't have a person like you to, I guess we're going to do this. So I want listeners to be aware we're going to do this every month, right? And you're going to throw stuff at me, and I'm going to do what I did.
I think today we had one. Other times we might have a whole handful of stuff to go through.
All right.
We'll see.
All right. Well, listeners, we couldn't do this without you. So please feel free to tune in to Mad in Love and Dr. Hawkins Reacts. And you can visit our work and see the work that we're doing at www.marriagerecoverycenter.com to learn more about what we're doing. And if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you can be notified of upcoming episodes. And again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk again soon.